Okay, so I just opened the sample project we're going to work with. Very familiar for those from last term. I just ran in the package manager console here my update database so that we actually have the database to work with. You can see I have quite a series of different migrations have been done to get the database up in sync with the different design changes I've made throughout this project development. Couple things just to familiarize your memory here in the migrations folder. The initial create got basic tables up in place for doctor and patient, and we went on and on. This is one we added manually to manually add a unique constraint on the OHIP number, right? Most of these are just generated code except for that one. And when it came to many-to-many, adding a many-to-many relationship, there was a change I manually had to make in here because the intersection table that it creates automatically, it by default sets up cascade delete so that you can delete either parent on either side and delete the child records. But we wanted to change it so that this is a history of medical conditions a patient has had in the past. So we wanted to prevent you from deleting a condition, say heart attack, if any patients already have noted a history of it, right? So I just came in here, we changed the cascade delete, took that out so that it would actually prevent you from deleting the parent record if there were child records related. My point I'm making is that most of these migrations are generated by the system itself, but we have manually edited some of these. So that highlights the value of keeping them. Sure, I could delete all these and just have it regenerate a new migration based on the latest models, but then I might lose some of the manual work I did in modifying the migrations. Added incentive then to keep my migrations that I have and just add security into my current database. Let's just refresh ourselves on a couple things. Oh, I did promise that one of the first things I would do would come in here to app start and we'll go into identity config. And down here is that key area where we decide our meanness factor, right? Where we set the password validator and its various options. So right now it's set pretty restrictive, in fact as much as it can be. So I'm going to change all of these to false so I can allow the most loosey-goosey, lazy password that I can think of. The only restriction has to be 6 letters long, and I'll live with that one. My favorite password to use when developing is password because I usually manage to remember that, right? And that passes all the tests indicated here. It's 6 letters long, and that's the only thing that's really restricting things. So there we go. Before I forget, I wanted to do that. All right. Now, I did say that we would come in and I maybe should, I've talked about this many-to-many. This is kind of off the topic, but let me just point out how this works again in any framework. If I have a patient here, and I have a many-to-many to different conditions. You know, you go to the medical office, you fill out a form for a new patient, and you check off, have you ever had a history of heart attack and stroke and diabetes and so on? So you check them off, and that's it, right? So that's what we're noting here in the database. So for the many-to-many, here's the code here that gives me a collection of conditions inside of my patient. If I go into the condition model class, all I have here is a collection of patients that have a history of this condition. I don't have to worry about creating the intersection table. The system does that for me automatically, and that's where that one migration I was showing you where I changed the cascade delete comes into play, just so we know how that works. And then we also did make a view model, right? So I had a separate view models folder here where I created a view model just to hold objects that would be helpful. I'll create a collection of these for every patient when I go to pass it to the view, and the view will use that in code to create the checkboxes and which ones are checked off, right? So this will have the condition ID, the name of the condition, and a Boolean as to whether this should be checked or unchecked in relation to a given patient. Okay, so what we want to do next is we want to think about security. Well, right now, the only connection string we've really utilized inside my web config file, remember there's this connection string section, and there's 2 here right now. Medical office CF entities, that happens to be the name of my DB context object. That's that telephone that I use to talk to the database from Entity Framework, right? The DB context is the conduit of all communication to the database. So by using the same name for the connection string, I don't have to configure anything, it just looks for it. But just to remind you, this one was here all along. I just have never used it yet. It was created when I first generated the project, which is also why it has this really weird name right, for the database file itself. ASP.NET, and then it takes my project name, and then it puts on a timestamp, date, month, date, year, everything else, of when I actually first created the project. Now this database doesn't even exist yet because I've never actually called for security. The built-in security system uses an initializer to create the database first time it's needed. Right? So I'm going to simulate that, or actually trigger it, by running this. Hopefully it'll work. Didn't get any build errors. And I'll get it up in the browser here. Wasn't sure which browser I was using. I guess it's set for Internet Explorer. That's okay, that will work. Of course, first time running it'll take a little while because it's got to do quite a bit of work to get ready. Okay. Okay, sorry about that. Solved it. I dragged the script folder in my project solution and put it into a subfolder. So it was broken. I just had to find it and put it back in place. So now I'm running here. Just to refresh your memory, so we have doctors and we have patients, right? We have some filtering and sorting for patients. I can edit conditions that the patient has had and check off, okay, diabetes or cancer as a history, right? We can create new conditions and so on, and away we go. Yeah, this is one my doctor told me once. I clearly had this condition. So I'll go back to myself as a patient here. Check off that one as well. And away we go. Right? So you get the idea. Okay. What we've never done but till now is register or log in. So I'm just going to register. Boy. Thankfully, I see that's one thing that's nice with Internet Explorer. Opera does the same thing and allows you to peek at your password. Register the user, and away we go. Now it shows that I'm registered. See, they've expanded even all the scaffolding is built in with an MVC. This didn't used to be here as well. There's already built in a managed controller and as well as the account controller for things like changing your password and so on and so forth. So those views are already all available and ready to go. Okay. So now that a difference we'll see is if I click the Don't Lie to Me button, we've created the additional database, right? Well, that's fine and dandy. That's good, but my goal is to actually have the security system integrated into my medical office database. I don't want this separate database. So how am I going to go about fixing that? Well, really, it's not terribly difficult. What we have to understand is the difference between the two context objects. Remember, that's that all-important object that is our conduit or telephone for talking to the database. Right now, I chose to create the separate DAL folder earlier, data access layer, and throw in our DB context object here. It happens to be named, same name as that connection string, medical office CF entities, right? And it inherits from DB context. And that's good. That's where we have all of our doctor, patients, and so on. All this stuff is there. I'm just going to copy all this. Notice we also have in here that code. Think about overriding save changes, so we're providing audit information to all the classes that implement the Audible class and have our Audible interface. Okay, anyway, so I'm going to copy all that stuff. Where does the actual DB context live for the security system? Well, that's down here in models. where we created our own models for doctor, patient, and so on. Here's identity models. And inside identity models, we don't have much in here. There is our application user, right? And here's our application DB context. So the first thing you'll notice looking at this, focusing on the context, is it seems different. You might say, why is this so complex? Right? Well, it's not really as bad as it looks. Instead of inheriting from our nice simple little DB context, it inherits from identity DB context. And we specify for application user here. Now, what does that really do though? All it means is that identity DB context already has code written to support DB sets for that handful of tables that we need, right? Our user roles, etc., etc. So it's just, instead of cluttering up the code, they're hiding some of it from us so we don't mess it up, for one thing, and so it doesn't complicate our view of the code. So all we're really doing is here, we're basically wrapping. It's almost like what we did with our iAudible, and when we implemented that into our Audible class, and then we had our patient class inherit from it. It's really the same kind of an idea. We're just kind of masking some of the complexity because we know that to support the security system, we have to have these additional DB sets based on our actual models for users and roles, etc. So that's all this really does. So it doesn't hurt us hardly at all to use this context instead of our other. It's just preloading it with all the DB sets for security, you might say. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to paste in everything that I had in my own context, because I'm going to use this application DB context. It's easier to go this way than the other way around, to try and add all the DB sets for the security components into my own context. Actually, you can do it, but this is a lot easier and cleaner. And besides, it's not just the DB sets. There's a few other features that come along by inheriting this way from identity DB context. So this is the safer of the two approaches. Now, of course, I'm going to get some red underlines, so I'll talk about that. First of all, there's just some usings missing. So my good old control period friend, using system web, kind of amuses me that it doesn't even know what a date time is. But using system takes care of that. And there's one more here because we need the entity infrastructure. So for DB entity entry, we use system data entity infrastructure. Okay. Now, one thing left, we can add a using for these two, but I'm going to run into a build error because right now I'm overriding, I did this in my own DB context, overriding on model creating. Trouble is, there already is an override for this elsewhere and I can't get to it. So I can't do this. This is the only negative aspect of this whole approach that I'm showing you, is I lose the ability that I've enjoyed so far to remove these conventions. Now they're only conventions, right? I could live without them from the very beginning. Cast your mind back what these were, is we were just removing the convention to pluralize table names. And that was strictly personal preference. I just prefer, if I have a doctor entity, to call the table where I store those records doctor rather than doctors with an S at the end. But it's a nitpicky little thing anyway. That one wasn't important. The second one to me was a little more important. Okay, I prefer to remove the one-to-many cascade delete convention, right? But I'm no longer going to be able to do that easily because I have to delete this code. Because I won't be able to build if I have that in there. I can't override it twice in two different spots. Okay, so there we go. The rest of it I can leave. So now, basically what I want to do is everywhere that I was using my medical office CF entities, I'm now going to use application DB context, right? So safest way to fix that is come over here. If I select this, I can right click and use the refactor tool built into Visual Studio to rename this to application DB context. Actually, I'm going to copy paste it to make sure I get it right. Forgive me. Oh, it won't let me just, okay. And this lets me preview, and I can quickly see most of the references are all in the controllers. Right at the top of the controllers is where we would create these objects based on the DB context object, and then use them for talking to the database. The one thing we are going to have to spend a little bit more time addressing is that configuration CS file. This was the basic file created when we enabled migrations on the project. We created this configuration file, and unfortunately it fully qualifies the name of the DB context. So my search and replace will fix it everywhere except for this one spot. So I'll apply that. There we go. And by the way, I don't even need this file anymore, so I can get rid of that. Delete. And there it is, gone. Okay. So the only one I said that was a problem is here in migrations, this configuration file. Right? The problem is it's going to have a red underline here because the way the code, this was written by the tool itself, and it's saying, wait a second, there is no such thing as this context inside this namespace, this folder in your system. Well, that's because it fully qualified it. If I just take this out, there it is, happy. Same thing down here. Then it immediately finds, okay, the application DB context class, right? Because it's already in the usings that are there. So that's good. So we're almost done. Okay, believe it or not, it's almost as simple as that. Now, of course, there's going to be changes, right? In terms of my migrations, I've now added a whole bunch of new DB sets, right, to my database to support all the tables needed for the security system. So the next thing I actually need is to add a migration. So I'm going to come down here to Tools, going to the Package Manager console. I can make the font bigger. And I just need to add a migration. And what this migration will do is it will look at the differences between my new DB context, which includes all the security stuff, and any other changes, hint hint, there's a couple, that are have been implemented with the changes in code, and what I have in the database so far, right? Add migration with identity, right? Security, whatever. Oh, failed to build. Must have some other build error. Must have missed something. Let me just build. Okay, my DAL. I should have just remmed it out. Oh well, that's okay. And I wouldn't have had to worry about that, but that's okay. All right, so I'm building okay. Now let me just come down here. I'll try this again. And it's going to do all of its magic, write all this code for me. Don't you just love tools that write all the code for you? Oh, migration's pending. Sorry, I'm getting an error because I missed another step. I hope you can learn from your mistakes as well as I can. One thing I forgot to do, and it's back in my models, right? In my identity models. Here, where we added all my new DB sets into the DB context, I forgot one thing. Default connection, right? This is how we've normally just used the naming convention by keeping the name of our connection string in our web config file the same as the name of the DB context. I never had to worry about it. But this is how you actually specify a different connection string name, right? So here for DB context, the base, we just pass the connection string we're going to use. So this is what I need to do. I need to change that to the appropriate one just to save. Here I'll grab my medical office, come back here, And that is the name of the connection string I want to use, because I still want to talk to my medical office MDF SQL Server database file. I still want to use it. I'm just going to put all the security inside there. Okay, that will work better now. So I don't even need, back in web config, while I have it open, I might as well, I can just take out or even at least comment out, right, that connection string, because I'll never use it again. And if I want to, just to prove a point, I'll take out this connection to this database. Okay, deleted the connection. We can delete the database. So I don't need that one anymore. I'm going to have everything in my medical office. So that was the boo-boo I made, is I just forgot to change that connection string to tell my new application DB context that I want to use my old database identified by this connection string, right? Sorry about that. Okay, I'm just going to do a build, make sure I'm okay. Yep. One more time. Let's see if I can get this. So we'll add our migration here. Now, okay, it was confused. It was trying to make all my user tables inside of the other one. Now it successfully worked, right? And we created a migration here that is almost everything I want, right? Most of it is exactly what I want. I'm creating the tables here for ASP.NET roles, ASP user roles, ASP.NET users, etc., user claims and logins, right? Those are those tables I needed now added to my existing database. So that is all good. There's only two issues that I have with this code the system wrote for me, okay? And they both come from the fact that I had to remove those changes to the conventions that the model builder uses. That's why we see this, rename table. Remember, I had that, I preferred not to pluralize table names. So because I had to take that out, I'm stuck here. It's going to rename all my tables to plural forms, doctor to doctors, patient to patients, etc. Well, you know, I can live with that. That was just a personal preference thing. It wasn't important. So that's okay. I'll live with that change as indicated in the migration. One thing I'm not happy about, the change in cascade delete for one-to-many relationships. I prefer to protect the parent record, that you can't delete it if there's existing child records, whereas by default, Entity Framework will delete the children, right, so that you can then maintain referential integrity as you delete the parent. So it automatically cascade deletes. Well, that's why it's dropping my foreign key, which enforces referential integrity. And further on down here, it adds a new foreign key relationship, putting cascade delete in place. So I know some people have an issue with changing these migrations, but that's why I pointed out earlier today that we have made a number of changes to get the design we want, because the tool doesn't always do everything as we like it, right? So this isn't the first time we've ever manually modified a migration. I'm going to do it now because I want to leave the cascade delete off of my doctor-patient relationship. So I just commented out those two lines in this migration. Coming to the down part, then I have to make sure I make the corresponding changes here. So I don't want to drop the foreign key or add that foreign key, right? Basically to change its relationship. Okay, that's good. I'm happy with that now. Almost there. The only thing left that I do want to do, I'll just close some of these other things. Okay, in my configuration file, think way back. This is where we seeded data to our initial own project tables, doctors, patients, etc., right? Wouldn't it be nice? Okay, there's that song running through my head. All I have to do is say that, and it's, wouldn't it be nice? Dee, 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 dee. Anyway, so wouldn't it be nice if we could also seed some users and roles, right? Why not? So that's where, in that code that I posted, I've got some code there. Now the truth is, it is possible to write exactly the same kind of code as you see here, right? We could make a new collection of users, right? Because there's a user class. We could provide all the necessary properties, but it does get a little tricky doing it this way, even though you can make it work, because remember we saw the password was hashed, right? So we have to actually add a hasher utility in order to do that, and there was other security codes that were put in place, these GUIDs and so on. So to come up with all those types of values using just, you know, our own code here, it's possible, but it's tricky. And why not use the tools we have available? So after I'm done seeding all that, I'm just going to grab the same kind of code that the system uses itself when we register a new user, right? A couple usings required, control period, using ASP.NET identity. Using ASP.NET identity.entity framework. And I think there's one more. Oh, I anticipated adding some custom profile information. That's why I have something here. So let me show you how to do that as well. Okay, that's going to require another migration, but that's okay. I'm going to do an update database anyway, so that won't hurt. Let me come over here to my models folder and go to the identity model. Right, so here is the application user. So I want to add a custom property. Remember, that was half the reason we were liking this identity system, is I could add additional information that I want to track about a user logging in besides email address and password, right? So I'm going to come in here and just use that code snippet. I'll make a new property inside this class, because what I want to keep track of, it'll just be a string value. And I want to keep track of something really important to me in my application, right? As a manager of the medical office, it really matters to me to know every user certain information, right? Something really, really important. So I want to add it right into the application user's profile. I'd really like to know what their favorite ice cream flavor is. Okay, this is critical information. So I'm going to add that. Okay, we'll just do another build. Now, because I've modified that one thing, I am going to have to come back once more. So yeah, this should have been part of the last migration, but I kind of missed it. So we'll add another migration. Oh, I have to update the database, sorry. Right, I have to update the database before I can do any additional migrations. So, darn, forgot about that. Let me comment this out for a moment. Well, actually, no. What I'll do is I'll delete that migration. I'll recreate it. That's even better. Okay, do a build. Come into migrations with identity. Say, no, I'm going to delete that one. And now I should be able to come into Package Manager console and just recreate that migration. Add migration. Oh. Okay. I'm in a circle. Okay. Sorry about that. I just deleted the wrong file. I had to just recreate the database. So if I do an update database with my new seed, right, then I'm successfully seeding users in place. So I'm just using the same code that is used when I actually register new users and so on, right? Just have a quick look at what I've added here. We create a role manager, and I use that. This if structure is just there because, unlike add or update with the normal approach for adding data in the seed method, I don't want to, because this gets run every time I do an update database, I don't want to be trying to recreate the role if it exists. So that's what this if is just to check if the role exists or not, and if it doesn't, then we create my admin role, right? I threw this loop in. I got it from one of the videos online about how to seed using Entity Framework the users. So I just loop through, create 4 users called user 1, 2, 3, 4, all with password. Just a note here, one thing that is a little wonky, to be honest with you, a little wonky about the latest change, the focus now that the identity system has on emails for the username instead of username. I don't know if I took time to show you or not, but if you look in the actual data, you see whatever you enter for the email when you register a user, as I know I did, also gets stored as the username. So basically, email and username are synonymous as far as this system is concerned, and it saves it in both places. And it needs to, because when you go to actually authenticate a login, it passes email ID to some code that expects to get username. So if they aren't both the same value, it will fail to log in. Kind of a bug in the system, but there it is nonetheless. So anyway, that's why I'm creating both the username and the email with exactly the same code, right? So we're just creating a bunch of users there. Then I'm making a special one that I'm going to use as the administrator login, right? Just called admin1, again with password, but I'm adding to role admin, right? So when I'm done seeding the data, I actually have one administrative user, a collection of other users, and away I go. So the only other thing is I forgot, right, in my identity model, I didn't do this in time to get in that first migration, so I'm just going to do it in another migration. I want to keep track of this very important information for my application, the favorite ice cream flavor of the user as they log in, right, or as they register. So I'm just going to add that to the model, in which case a couple things will happen. One, I might as well plan on supplying data for it, even though it allows null values. I can do that in here quite easily, just by assigning favorite ice cream as I actually generate users. And of course, the default value has to be chocolate, right? There's no question. Okay, so I'll put that in my seed data as well, but I will have to just one last time, hopefully, and this will work, come in and add another migration because I've modified the properties of an application user. Add migration for ice cream. Oh, failed to build. Sure enough, I should always double check. I have a syntax error. Okay. I took out, or I didn't have in a comma there, and I had one too many there. I just meant to put it in the middle of the thing like I did down here. Sorry. Quick fix. Double check. Make sure there's nothing else. Yep. Okay. Same thing again. Add migration. And it scaffolded it, right? So you can see the up and the down, and really just to add the column to ASP net users, favorite ice cream. Okay. So I'll update database. Should have put a size restriction on instead of getting an invarchar max, but it's okay. It's not the most important thing right now. Okay, so it ran the seed method, and away we go. So now I have fully achieved my goal, right? My database system is using my current or existing file, MDF file. Inside here are all of the ASP.NET user roles, claims, all the security tables, as well as, of course, all of my actual data tables. And I simply added them into my current database, and it's fully functional. If I actually run here, just let me point out, here are the values that were seeded for the users, right? So I can see all the different ones. User 1, 2, 3, 4, my admin user, right? And again, let me emphasize, the user names are all exactly the same as the emails. I should have created one role, and I did, an admin role, and I assigned that one user to the role, so that shows up in here, right? And you can see, of course, these are string GUIDs, which is why it's nice to let the tool create these as opposed to you trying to do it manually or something like that. Okay. Now the only thing left is I could quickly demo actually using all this security to control who can do what in the system, right? So let's just, for the fun of it, let's make up a couple things quickly. Anybody can come to the home controller, no problem. Let's say for the patient controller, you can't even come here unless you're at least authorized. Right? Oop, didn't want that character, I just meant to push enter. So if I just come down here, throw on my authorize attribute, okay, then nobody can come here unless they're at least logged in. Okay. So I'll just maybe play with the patient controller. So they're at least logged in, and let's say that now we know who they are, they can view, maybe they can create new ones, or no, we'll say that they can edit, but we won't let them delete, and we won't let them create new ones unless they're actually an administrative user, right? So to do that, I'll come down here to the edit. So we said, what did I say? That they can't edit or can't create? I can't remember what I just say. Okay, we might as well do edit, all right? So if we're not going to let them edit unless they're an administrator, right, then I should come in here and just decorate this one, authorize, and specify roles admin. Right, so only an admin user. Now, of course, remember how this works is a get and a post. Right, so I have to make sure I decorate both. So only admin user can actually edit. Lots of code there because we have the all the different database error handling, as well as concurrency control, as well as we're doing our many-to-many relationship. So we're looping through our collection of checkboxes. That's why that's so big and interesting looking. Okay, same thing for delete. Only an administrator can delete. Okay, so that's good. So if we run this, so I'm not logged in at all. I can come to the home screen, but if I try to go to patients, I get kicked over to the login, right? I have to log in first, so I'll log in as just a user. Oh, user. And now I can see, right, all the data, but if I try to edit, I'll get kicked back to the login because I'm not an administrator. Same thing for delete, right? But I would be allowed to create a new because we didn't add any further restrictions on the create. So I'll log out, I'll log back in as an administrator. Now when I go to patients, I can actually go in and edit. Right? Fred, he likes to be called Freddy, and he has a history of cancer. Okay, oh, I forgot, he also has a history of diabetes. Okay, so then they both show up there, and away we go. So I can only edit this patient information because I am an administrator, right? If I log back out and log in, I should have had that. Does it remember? Yeah, user 1. I can create a patient, so let's create a new patient here. OHIP number. Oh, 10 digits. There is restriction on there for uniqueness as well, because we added that earlier. First name, Joe. Date of birth. Comes out 6 times a year. and it's a history of heart problems. Okay, so there's our new one that we added. I just wanted to show you that and how it affects the audit history as well. But I can't edit it because I'm not an administrator, right? So you can have someone who could just enter the data, but they can't change it once it's been entered. Okay, now of course the last thing you probably would want to do is hide and show links in the view as well, depending on whether or not the user has privileges to actually see them, right? But that's just cosmetic. It's most important to get the protection on the controllers. Last thing I'll just show you then is quickly, if we have a look in the tables, if I look at the patient table, show table data, I will see here in the history updated by, right, who last updated the record and when and so on. All from my security system, and away we go. So that's it. That's all I think I'm going to show you. Any questions?